All right. We're both unmuted and we're shifting over to here. Okay. Welcome again for the second webinar series with myself, Hamada Zahawi at Right Track Admissions, and my colleague and friend, Sema. Say hi, Sema. Let's see if we can hear you.
Hi, everyone.
Fantastic.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, hopefully the mic check is working and we're good to go. So a little bit of a doom and gloom period, but also obviously some, I guess, respite and a little bit of a reprieve, given that there are a little bit more of a flattening of the curve as we're seeing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the economy is still struggling to keep up with what's been going on in the current environment. And so, given that, we wanted to kind of continue on the same track as we were before. In terms of helping you seeking jobs, transitioning, pivoting, and whatever you need in the job market, which is definitely turbulent as we speak. So without further ado, Summer decided to use this awesome image and put it up there, which is a little bit on a black background, so a little more doom and gloom, but an awesome image itself, which kind of gives you a little bit of hope with Mother Earth protecting itself from the coronavirus.
The point I was trying to get across, Mother, was that we're all in this together. There isn't a single, I think, country or population or community that isn't affected by the coronavirus. Maybe a select few nested high in the mountains or isolated on an island have no idea what we're talking about. But by and large, most of us are in the same boat, including you and I. So I think this is just a great opportunity for us to come together and really be honest about what we're trying to work through and figure out how to do that together. And hopefully you and I, since we have some experience working through, this type of turbulence, we can reflect that so that folks like you listening today can avoid some of the mistakes that Hamada and I have made in the past.
Perfectly said. Thank you. And that's exactly right. We're going to show the map that people have been monitoring over the last month and a half, and showing that about 185 countries, and I think there's about 193 in the world, 194, have been impacted by the coronavirus. So to your exact point, also there is a secretly hidden, so to speak, hidden mascot of the company, of Right Track Admissions. So if you can see it, let me know, and please comment if you can find it and tell me what it is. But also, more seriously, if you do have questions, please indicate that in the LinkedIn or in the Facebook, as we're streaming this live. So go ahead and indicate any questions that you have, and we'll try to respond to it over the course of the webinar. And also, if you like what we're doing, if you like what we're saying, please smash that like button on either one of the platforms, or just indicate to us whether you like it or not, because that does help give us some more feedback as we go through the process. Okay, so let's, without further ado, start moving this forward. Okay, so just again, by way of background, let's see if I can move this. Oops. So basically, by way of background, I have been leading Right Track Admissions for over 12 years now. We've worked with over 1,000 clients in that period. Whether it's on your academic journey, whether you're going to college or graduate school, as well as your professional journey in the process. I've also done work in international development, worked with the US government, and primarily I'm a trained lawyer. So, so that's my background.
Sure. Thanks, Mother. So firstly, hopefully wherever you are, you're safe and well and your families are healthy. And I hope all of us are practicing the stay at home best practices that have been shared by the WHO and our local health authorities. With that, a little bit about me. My most recent background is in the technology sector, primarily within the domain of customer success, which essentially is the post-sales customer lifecycle and all the operations that entails. Prior to working in the tech sector, I actually worked in international development abroad with multiple organizations. And so along the way, did make a transition. So for anyone who is looking to pivot, try out a new industry or really reinvent themselves at this time, I am happy to lend that perspective. I've had to do it, and I can certainly provide some key lessons that I have learned along the way, if that could be of benefit to you. So that's me. Nice to meet you all.
Excellent. And in terms of just our educational background, you can see personally, I banked on education to get me through a lot of the economic recessions. In fact, oddly enough, I wouldn't say it's a chicken or the egg, whether I got into school during an economic recession and graduated after. I would say, no, I missed the spike on that. What I ended up doing is when I graduated from UCLA from undergrad, it was during the 2002 economic crisis after September 11th. When I graduated from Berkeley from law school, it was in 2008 during that economic crisis. My most recent graduation from Harvard during doing a master's in public administration was not during economic crisis. And obviously that helped in terms of just landing right in the middle of a secure job market. But it is something that you want to be mindful of. And it is something that we have definitely been subjected to, and how we had to figure out and adapt to avoiding the traps, I would say, of graduating in a bad market and not knowing how to navigate out of it, which is what we're trying to really kind of relate to you here. Anything on that?
Yeah, I would say that, my interests in pursuing the programs that I did were primarily centered around being able to develop the intellect, skills, and acquire the network that I would need to propel forward. I think that, your guidance is an environment. Who you surround yourself with matters, and not only at a personal level in terms of kind of the friends that you make, but also as you progress professionally. If you go to a top program, while hopefully you benefit from the direct instruction and the faculty interactions, primarily most of us benefit from the student interactions, and that was certainly the case for me at Berkeley and at the London School of Economics. And I can't tell you time and again how those close, tight-knit networks have come through for me, and I think been able to provide me with maybe an accelerated view, and to an extent being able to skip the line when it comes to actually applying for a job, because I could bank on referrals within a pretty large network of successful professionals. And we can talk about how you can go about building your network. We can touch on that briefly today, but certainly if that's of interest to anybody, then please do send us a note or comment below, and if there's enough interest, maybe we can cover that in a future webinar. But ultimately, I think the point here is that, if you are thinking about going back to school, or you're conscious of any skill gaps, then, it certainly makes sense to address those, because careers, they're not linear. Your professional trajectory, it will span over multiple decades, and your education will continue to set the foundation, and ultimately, recruiters will notice you and, look to see if you've invested the time to build a foundational and cross-functional skill set. So more on that later.
Yeah, and we're going to be having a webinar. The next webinar actually is going to be about applying to graduate school as an option during this economic crisis, to upskill, increase your network, and hopefully weather the storm. So definitely stay tuned for that on April 22nd. And I'm going to be bringing in one of my colleagues who is a Rhodes Scholar, as well as a recent Knight Hennessy recipient at Stanford University. And so she's going to be speaking to the audience about how not just to get into graduate school, but also how to secure funding and a scholarship, which is obviously going to be an important factor as we go through this process. So let's kind of go through what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing the COVID economy very, very quickly, give you a snapshot of where we stand today, how to improve your chances of getting hired. And then we want to do a deep dive into the resume. Obviously, that's one of the most important factors in the whole process of your application. If we could break down your application, it essentially comes down to, at least in tangible form, your resume, the cover letter. Sometimes they require it, sometimes they don't. The LinkedIn profile, so that they can see an active, evolving profile that's online. And then finally, the interview prep process. And those are the really core, tangible elements of the application process. So we're going to focus today's on a resume deep dive. We're going to tear through a resume that we've typically seen with the same typical mistakes. We want you to be able to benefit from our insights into that. And then finally, how we can kind of help more on a personal one-on-one level through the process. So without further ado, this is where we stand. Kind of a bit of a doom and gloom. I wanted to show you, for those who don't obsess about this website, this is kind of where we stand today. We're over the 2 million person threshold. In terms of infections throughout the world, as we indicated, it's impacted 185 countries worldwide. So unless you're really in obscure Siberia or somewhere in Greenland, this is definitely impacting you at home. So that's an obvious and an important factor, and it's not something to be taken lightly. This has definitely changed people's lives. And sadly, there's been over 100 and almost 130 deaths that have transpired since the beginning of this crisis about 4 months ago. That being said, that would be the human loss and impact of this crisis. But I would be remiss if we didn't also talk about the economic, which is why we're here today. And obviously the economic crisis, we're giving you a small little snapshot of from live data from the Department of Labor in terms of the different areas that are really suffering and taking a toll on the job market as we speak. But all that being said, yes, it is a fairly doom and gloom situation that's been happening, but there is a silver lining, and there is things what you can do to basically better position yourself. And what we have are some of the companies that are hiring immediately right now as we speak. In fact, government is hiring. Again, I'm just talking from an American perspective, but I can almost guarantee you that this is probably also taking place in your respective country. Medical device companies, online and home healthcare, essential retailers, those are keeping the lights on and helping us survive. Working from home, essentially exactly what we're doing right now. We're using a service called StreamYard to provide you with access to LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live. I've been using Zoom, Google Hangouts, Skype, you name it. So a lot of these companies are doing great in terms of basically helping everybody stay connected, and obviously the e-commerce space and so forth. Sama found through her networks, and she'll speak a little bit about this amazing resource where one of her contacts sat down and meticulously put together this awesome spreadsheet, which I'm going to quickly show you. I'll give you a little bit of a snapshot about it, which basically quickly provides you with some of the companies that are actively hiring in this present market. Sama, tell me again, how did we get our hands on this?
It's amazing. I think that I'm blessed to be part of a network that is so generous, and people have been going out of their way to share resources, to compile and consolidate a list of companies that are hiring. Because I work in business and technology, we have many relationships with clients, and eventually your clients become almost like an extension of your family. You end up spending a significant amount of time with them, and as your client base grows, then naturally your network grows. And I think how that's benefiting people today is, being able to tap into resources and, other free applications that many companies are extending at this time to help us get through what is a challenging period. I saw yesterday just such a beautiful note that somebody had posted on LinkedIn about a company that had laid off multiple workers, and those colleagues and teammates were really missing each other's presence. And so Slack has kind of a freemium model. You can use Slack up to a certain point before you have to start paying. And this individual emailed Slack and asked if they could have access to their premium offering for a few months, and that request was granted for free. And it was just a really nice, heartfelt post. So take advantage of people's goodwill at this time, and build your network, because you can save a lot of time and, again, jump the line. I think the point of building a network is to be able to jump the line or help others jump the line. If you're in a great position to help people pay it forward, if you're the one seeking help at this time, then be authentic and honest about where you're at, and great time to actually work on your interpersonal skills and figure out how to network and, be personable and have people extend a hand. So that's really how I found that spreadsheet, and I've shared it with so many people. So if you're interested, we're happy to to share the link, and it's a public document that you're welcome to share with anyone else as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And so, yeah, we have that link and we can provide that to you. If you email us at info@RightTrack Admissions, we can provide that to you, as well as some of the other resources that we have. So I'll let it go to you. Sama, tell us a little bit about the success plan.
Yeah. So, before you embark on a search of any opportunity, I think that it's really important that you take time to put together a personal success plan. And it's something that I would argue that you should invest time in refreshing that plan at least once a year, if not quarterly. But ultimately, every path will take you if, you don't have a plan and you don't know where you're going. And so this is ultimately a process by which you can set yourself up on a series of, prescriptive measures that will allow you to get to your final goal or reach your final destination. So how do you start? Well, take some time to really introspect. I think most of us have more time than we'll ever have in our lives to actually do this right now. But think about the kind of impact or legacy that you want to leave behind. Be truthful to who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your natural proclivities are, and what you're passionate about. And if you were to think about your last few years on Mother Earth, what kind of legacy would you want to leave behind? What do you hope you won't regret? And then reverse engineer from there, determine what your priorities are. What are some of the things that you are no longer going to commit your time to? And then what are some of the things that you are going to primarily focus your time on? And once you've done that, then it comes down to actually figuring out how you're going to execute and, chart your course. And don't go it alone. Don't assume that you need to, seek or navigate your path by yourself. Seek help, seek resources. Great time to find a mentor and build some solid relationships. Take online classes. Consider going back to school. But ultimately, come up with a few key next steps. Focus really on your next action, rather than getting bogged down in creating the perfect plan. I think that perfect is the enemy of progress. And you can get unstuck by just doing something. Just get started anywhere, somewhere, just start. But don't invest too much time in building the perfect plan and then failing to execute. So, in my experience, the most successful hires I've made have been, individuals that at the end of the day make it happen and drive outcomes. So I won't go on any further here, but the main point I wanted to make was, before you just start, rushing online, Google searching, trying to find jobs and applying, take a moment to pause, reflect, and reset. Think about what it is you want to do and, what your kind of key success criteria at a personal level is. And then that will provide you with a much more narrow and focused starting point to begin, your job application preparation and search.
Yeah, let me just jump in there. A small, tiny little tidbit. I think a lot of it is mindset. I don't know about how many of you guys are trying to stay fit during the course of this COVID crisis. We're stuck at home. A lot of us go to the gym or yoga studios or what have you. And oftentimes we're just finding we're losing a lot of momentum in doing what we normally would do because other people are there to kind of prop you up. So I was reading a book, trying to do more reading, obviously, during this period. And one of the guys that they were featuring in the article was talking about just waking up in the morning and doing just one push-up, and then constantly doing that every single day. And then that basically creates a mentality that you have to do something in terms of an exercise that then you can keep building and building and building on. And the same thing here with your job functionality. You don't want to basically put something out there that is so hard to get that you have this perfect plan. I think that's actually beautifully said, that perfect is the enemy of progress. But the idea here is that you want to create a plan that can be broken down. So if you walk out of this COVID crisis hopefully in the next month or two or what have you, you want to have achieved something that you can keep building off of, because it's not just the COVID crisis that we're enduring, it's life in general. If this wasn't happening, we'd still have these webinars about people who are struggling through different turbulent economies, right? And so the idea here is that you want to be able to create bite sizes that you can keep building off of and have achievements that would then motivate you as a virtuous cycle to go on to the next phase and next phase and next phase, and do what Sema said, which is just make it happen, and not just sit there and chart the course and just keep seeing that course go nowhere. So I think that's a very, very important part, is just bite sizes to kind of move you forward. And then here's something that Sema did mention. I think that's very, very important, which is the differentiation between the hard skills and the soft skills, and basically looking to target those skills. Sema, tell me a little bit about like what you were thinking and maybe how you're putting this into motion for yourself, even at this juncture in your career.
Absolutely. So I think the point I wanted to make here was that be strategic about the kind of skills that you are building. Hopefully you're investing in building and acquiring skills that will be needed for the foreseeable future. If you've been passionate about being a typewriter aficionado, well, unless you maybe you haven't heard, but we've moved on from using typewriters. So, obviously that was a really lame analogy, but I'm trying to come up with something better off the cuff. The point being is, look at the data, look to see what's actually in demand, talk to prospective employers, do your homework, do your research. This is an infographic I pulled off of a recent article that LinkedIn published in January, highlighting what the top 5 soft skills and the top 10 hard skills, are actually in demand based on the job profiles that are being posted today by employers. And hopefully most of these resonate on some level and aren't shocking to you. But if they are, then just reconsider, where you're spending your time. And that's not to say that you shouldn't pursue your passion. If there isn't a soft skill listed here or a hard skill listed here, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to hone that skill. Again, this is just an overview, but the upshot here is that for anyone to stay competitive in what is now a much more competitive economy that has shrunk, we need to make sure that we can actually do the job and then do the job well. That takes a level of commitment, practice, and again, leveraging your network to get feedback. And I think that humility will take you a long way and allow you to continue to upskill as you go forward. I'm curious, Hamada, right now I'm spending some of my spare time taking online courses and finding that I actually have this amazing, focused, silent period that I'm sure will end very soon. I don't know what you're doing with your time, but do you think that online courses are a way of actually building relevant skills, or should we be looking elsewhere as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is something I've been struggling with, being disciplined and almost autodidactic in the way that you're learning on your own and not with others and being held accountable. I'm signed up to take a Coursera course on, I think, valuation and finance, because this is not an area of expertise that I have. I'm a lawyer and public policy person or expert from that perspective, but not somebody that really focuses on valuations, finance in general. And so I've taken a course on Coursera, and it's hard. It's not easy to be disciplined in that way. But I mean, you have to think about it and keep yourself kind of engaged in a way that motivates you. I'm telling you, this whole thing is really about motivation and staying the course and not just keep on kind of going through the motions. And when this whole thing, as I said, subsides, you kind of look back like, what did I achieve? What did I do? Did I dig in personally and figure out my path? Did I upskill during this time? No, I didn't. I just did the same old, watch TV and just chilled and did nothing. That's not, we personally, I'm not going to espouse that. I think this is, like you said, a period of quiet that you can do a lot with for yourself. So in addition to that, I'm, even if I say to you, calling up your friends on Zoom or Skype and doing group workouts, it is incredible of how much more motivated you are. Putting yourself again, with somebody else and exchanging knowledge, investing in the stock market and doing different things, but doing it as a group effort as well. I think is very important during this time. So don't think that you're alone. Use this opportunity to share that burden with somebody else and lift yourselves up together. And a lot of these skills you're seeing, I mean, again, there's a massive distinction between the soft skills that you just learn in terms of interpersonal stuff, which again is a little bit more difficult to do while you're secluded. But even doing these things, I mean, for us, doing webinars, live webinars where, we're kind of under the gun and that way we can't make too many mistakes. That's an important factor. And that teaches you certain speaking skills, interpersonal skills, and so forth. You should do more of that, publish more, write more, things like that can do from the soft skill side. And then the hard skills, pick an area that you're really interested in. I know I've worked with clients who have had aspirations to go into product management, for example, and have no idea what the field's about. They just heard it sounds cool, but they don't know what it is. And so you've got to do a deep dive, reverse engineer, figure out what people in this space are doing, and start taking the courses, talk to the people, and move that forward. I think that's very, very important to do during this time. And as you can see, the title of this thing is Building Relevant Skills in the 2020 In-Demand Skills. I mean, these are literally fresh off the press. So you want to be mindful of that process. Yeah. Oops. Go ahead.
Okay. So, ultimately, what you want to do is stand out at every stage of the application lifecycle. So you've built your personal plan, you've identified where some of your skill deficiencies and gaps are. You're going to work to overcome those, but in the meantime, you still need to find a job. And so how do you do that? Well, ultimately, there's a lot of preparation that needs to go into, being able to secure an opportunity. And it really comes down to these 5 stages: preparing yourself, in addition to the portfolio of documents and artifacts that you will need to actually apply, and then applying itself and making sure you do that such that ATS systems can actually absorb and receive that information and process that, giving you an opportunity to hopefully actually get screened and then land an interview. There are other ways to actually also accelerate your ability to jump the gun in terms of having to go through a formal system-based application process, which we can talk about. And then, I think one mistake I see a lot of candidates make is that, they get through the interviews, there's a certain air of confidence that they project towards the end, maybe the final stages. And then when it comes to the offer stage, they botch the negotiation. And I've seen people rescind offers based on the dynamics that present during that stage. So be really careful about, being overconfident as you get through the final stages of the interview process and, kind of shooting yourself in the foot at the offer stage. And then, folks will always remember the kind, small gestures. In fact, I hate to use the term small gestures because no gesture is small, even just like your body language, the way that you dress and present yourself, the niceties around how you, prepare yourself, and then how you follow up following an interview or a series of interactions. Those things get noticed. And just at any one of these stages, imagine yourself in, a pool of, 10 million applications. How are you going to stand out? And approach, each one of these stages from that perspective. Constantly think about how you are going to differentiate yourself. And I think that it's going to take a little bit of ingenuity and creativity, but ultimately, most of us have gone through this at a later stage in our careers multiple times. So lean on people who are in roles that you desire or that you aspire to, and they can certainly help. And if you don't have anyone to turn to, we're certainly available. And Hamada will kind of talk about later on the different ways that we can work with folks at a one-on-one personal level. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to really focus on the preparing stage with a deep dive on the actual resume. And we're going to bring up a live example. So before diving into the live example, I'll talk kind of high level about some of the key considerations you want to make when preparing your materials in your application. So again, we talked about the success plan. You have outlined, your values, and you have narrowed down the opportunities that are desirable and aligned with the kind of impact that you want to have, and maybe take into account any financial and or other health circumstances. We have to be honest that sometimes we're not able to pursue a particular passion at a given time because other considerations triumph those or trump those rather. So, whatever your circumstances are, you've now narrowed down your search. Create a job tracker. Don't just apply haphazardly. Target a series of opportunities that are, compelling, that are within your skill profile, that are attainable based on the research that you have done, and look at a few different key variables along the way. Are the companies that you're applying to going to be viable businesses given the challenges that we're seeing today in the market? Have they raised a recent amount of funding? Do they have a revenue model that will sustain through the crisis? And how many people have they fired or hired recently? If some of those statistics are available online or through LinkedIn, then use those as signals as to whether it's the right time to apply, or reach out to people one-on-one and try to feel for what the dynamics are and if anyone has been laid off on their team before you apply and waste your time. So once you have that job tracker, and if you're interested, we do have a template that we can share so that you can start to organize your search and build a plan and kind of track the different responses and documents that you create to apply for those different jobs. From there, once you've identified those desirable opportunities, before you apply, you need to make sure that your resume is formatted correctly so that it can be read by an application tracking system. Even the best resumes sometimes don't get read by an application tracking system. And if you felt like you were the best, candidate for that role, and yet you didn't even get, a first round interview, it could be that you sort of missed that step. Then also consider the fact that you need to tailor your resume for a specific role. Now, in the early, part of this cycle, when you maybe don't know what you're applying for, you can create a generic resume, but then the goal is to ultimately build off of that and remove anything that's not relevant, or rewrite, your resume in a way that's going to resonate with the hiring manager and speak their language. And then finally,
let me quickly jump in on that again, just so everybody knows. ATS being application tracking system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I'll just quickly cover these last 2 points, and then I want to jump into the live example. We talked about LinkedIn last time, I believe, and I think there's a lot in there. We offer at the end of this webinar, we're going to be offering just for 5 people, the first 5 people that email us, a job profile review. And one of the things that we covered for one of the candidates that contacted us after the last one was going through the LinkedIn profile. And there is a lot of gold nuggets that can come out of that, because what Sum is saying about the resume is that's a static document that needs to be obviously ATS friendly, but the LinkedIn gives you and provides you opportunities to have links for videos and publications, recommendations that actually pop up on the screen that somebody can see, rather than references that they would then have to contact. There's so much more value that can come into the LinkedIn profile. So it's mission critical that you have a very, very strong LinkedIn profile. And finally, the cover letter, which we can talk about in future webinars. And in here, some companies are no longer even considering cover letters, and maybe too archaic for them. But the beautiful thing about having a very strong cover letter is, it can be used, as some had mentioned last time, to DM folks on LinkedIn in a proper way with right verbiage that's really catered to that individual. The cover letter can also help you kind of create and craft emails if that's all you're going to be sending the employer, recruiter, and so forth. And the cover letter really provides you with good jargon to use for that. And then obviously the cover in and of itself is a cover letter and can serve that purpose, which certainly and must always, without fail, work to be tailored for the different job that you're applying to. So you want to keep that in mind, and we'll probably be covering those 2 points at a later time. But right now we want to do a little bit of a deep dive into the resume, because that is the foundational anchor document that you have and that you're going to lead with when you're applying, not just in a formal capacity, but an informal capacity as well, because they may want to see just a resume quickly off the cuff when you're talking to them in impromptu. So let's jump over there at the live example. Let's see if I can pull this up for you. Boom, there it is. So someone may be telling me a little bit about this resume. It is not yours, even though you put your name up there, because we're about to shred it. And we want people to take a look at this and see what we're going to do, because I think this is very, very important for you to think about. These are just maybe covering, what would you say, 10, 20, 30% of possible errors that we see. I mean, there are reoccurring errors, but there's a lot of other things that do happen. This is just some of them. So it just gives you a basic a gist of what we're trying to really kind of signal to you to have a better sense of what to look out for.
Yeah, so I tried to identify an example that would speak to the more salient, I think, best practices when it comes to resume writing, where I think I'm starting to see people are making these mistakes far more commonly than I would have imagined. So I think I've now reviewed in the last 2 weeks, maybe over 100 resumes. And so again, this is a reflection of what, commonly recurring mistakes that I'm seeing. But to Hamada's point, there's so much more that goes into resume writing, and some of the advice might differ based on the industry that you're applying for. So if you are a scientist, the way that some of the core elements that you include in your resume may be very different than what you might include if you are working in finance. So just keep that in mind. We haven't tailored this to a specific industry, but hopefully the insights here will benefit anybody that's listening. And one thing,
I'm going to throw this at you. Sorry to cut you off. I'm going to ask you to cover 1 and 2, and I'm going to go into the 2 after that. So just heads up, I'm flipping the script on you. It's going to keep you on your toes. So I would love it if you can cover point 1 and point 2.
Sure. Just a disclaimer. Yes, I put my name there, but this actually represents a real resume that I reviewed. I scrubbed it and removed all personal identifiable information and rewrote some of the language below and made up a bunch of fake companies. So just in case, the individual whose resume that this mirrors is watching, we're not revealing your identity, and no one's going to be able to tell that this is your resume. So just a heads up. All right. So with that, let's get started. So at the top, you see that this individual has placed a header with their name and some key information. They've got their location, their number, and their email. And just a quick note here: you want to have a link to your LinkedIn profile. Most people, before they even take the time to review your resume, are actually going to start by looking at your LinkedIn profile. They want to see a picture of you. They want to get a quick sense of who you are and what you're about. And so just keep in mind, you want to add a link to your LinkedIn profile there. And one thing that is no longer necessary is putting your full address. I think a lot of us are worried about being stalked and getting unfriendly mail or having someone actually show up at our doorstep. That information you can provide later on in the process, maybe at an offer stage. But initially, the location information is just important, particularly for jobs that are considering or that require you to be in the office. Now, if you're worried that you live in DC, but you're applying for a job in New York, then what you can do is you can put a little note at the top that says that you're willing to relocate, right? Or you can put it under your summary. So just a quick note. And then if your resume does go over 1 page, just make sure that your identifiable information in that header is present on subsequent pages. And I can see that Hamada nicely centered the text there. I think that obviously makes for a more aesthetically enhanced experience. Keep in mind that recruiters and most hiring managers look at a resume for 6 seconds. So you have 6 seconds to give someone, to wow somebody, and invite them to spend a little bit more time actually looking at your resume. So keep that in mind. And then the final point I'll make here at the top, for application tracking systems, if you see the way that Hamada actually provided a LinkedIn link, if you are applying through an ATS system, you might want to have the long form of your URL available there and not hyperlink it, because it could get misread by the system, and that could impact your chances of actually having your resume screened. So sometimes if you are handing your resume to somebody, or that it's not going to go through an application tracking system, that's fine. Include hyperlinks and things. It can be a lot easier for someone to click through and get the information that they need. But if applying through an ATS, then I would personally have the long form of
And when you say applying through an ATS system, you're talking like if you're submitting this to like what exactly does that mean? Like a job bank or a job resume? What exactly is a ATS system versus if I fired this off to John Doe, the recruiter at the place I'm looking to get hired in, and they're getting my resume? If they get the hyperlink that's baked into the wording itself, that's okay. But if you're actually submitting it to a job bank, is that different? Is that what you mean by the ATS system looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you've never heard of an application tracking system, essentially it's a means in a way for companies to manage what can be sometimes a large influx of applications, and then parse through those very quickly to make sure that the most relevant applicants and relevant candidates kind of are surfaced to the top. So it saves a recruiter a lot of time rather than having to comb through the 5,000 applications that they received. They can look at the application tracking system based on the way that it's designed, or the algorithms that have been coded will look for specific keywords and or verbiage to identify candidates that are more likely to meet the job criteria. So just keep that in mind. And the way that those application tracking systems read documents, including your resume or your cover letter, may be limited to text. And so if you have a beautiful, fancy graphic or image of yourself, just keep in mind that may not get processed properly by the application tracking system. Again, if you're handing someone your resume and you're a design freak or expert, or you're really good at enhancing the aesthetic of a document like this, then certainly go for it. Those don't fall on blind eyes. But again, just keep in mind that a system, if it's reading your resume, may not be able to read it properly. So I won't go into any further detail, but if you have any additional questions about how to submit an ATS-friendly resume, or you need it reviewed or something, then that's certainly something that we can help you with. Does that answer your question, Hamada?
It does. And I want to be mindful of the time because we spilled over a little bit last time, and I want to make sure we keep this really bundled within an hour and give some time for Q&A at the end. So let's quickly blitz through point number 2 and the subsequent points. Go ahead.
Yeah, so professional summary, keep this to 2 sentences. You can see that the mistake that this individual made was that they wrote out a whole paragraph, and I'm already bored. I don't even want to read this paragraph. It's a bit of an eyesore. So that's the first point. The second point is that it contains like a laundry list of, keywords that maybe were part of the job description or something. So it looks like she just threw in everything under the sun. And some of the language is a little pompous, I think, like calling yourself a strategic thinker, I think that's a little egocentric. Personally, what you can do is demonstrate that you're a strategic thinker by putting together an incredibly compelling cover letter and resume and being prepared. I think that your resume is an opportunity for you to reflect the way that you think, the way that you organize information, and the way that you present information. And it's essentially, it's your personal brand, it's part of your personal brand to an extent. So be very concise and strategic about the language that you use in your professional summary.
And let me quickly add to that 2 points. Number 1, you really shouldn't be thinking about putting a professional summary if you have anything less than, I would say, personally, 10 years. If you have 5 years of experience, don't bother. There really is no point. You want to keep your resume concise to 1 page regardless. Putting a professional summary is not necessary. Number 2, there's a difference between professional summary or career summary and objective. I think putting objective is nonsensical. The idea of saying I'm looking for a job that really allows me to grow as an individual, no kidding. Obviously, who's going to take on a job that's not going to allow them to grow? Who wouldn't want something like that? So be very, very mindful, I would say, not to put an objective and to really make your professional summary, as Sama said, concise to 2 sentences. Sentence number 1 should be something really hitting them on the head with actual statistics. 10 years of legal experience with 6 languages in the areas of 1, 2, and 3, right? And then say another sentence that says, You can even almost there put an objective, say, focus on looking at turning around financial sector companies in small businesses in emerging markets. Boom, what do I see? I see the number of years, I see the skills you already put numerically, and I know exactly what you're looking for without saying I'm looking for a job. So keep it in mind, if you have 10 years of experience plus, that's okay to put a professional summary or career summary. Do not use an objective, put an objective on the top, and really keep it to like 2 sentences and not make it pompous. Because if you can't tell me whether you're a strategic thinker or skilled at establishing sustainable relationships or all these other factors, bake it into your resume where I can see it with actual examples of where you perform these things, then I don't want to see it at all. Because I can write right now that I am phenomenal at negotiating peace deals and solving the coronavirus. And nobody's going to know that because I'm saying it. And if it's not substantiated, it means 0. So just keep those things in mind.
And please don't use the term results driven. That term irks me, especially if there are no numbers in your resume.
Because who's not going to be results driven? Like, no, I want to freaking smash into a wall. No kidding, you're results driven. And that basically goes into the skills right here. Skills to me are basically 2 really primary skills in this section. And I would drop the skills to the bottom. Skills is really to me called skills and interests. I've always said this to everybody. The skills part really comes into computer languages. And really nobody cares if you know, how do I say it? Java or C++ if you're applying for a job and as a lawyer, right? It doesn't matter. You can put it there if you want to, but it's not mission critical. You want to put the skills that are going to be proficient in the universe of that job you're applying for. But if you're going to put in computer, but like some underlined there, and you can almost see the way she scribbled the line. She hates Microsoft Office, right? Because instead, right there, unless you're proficient, I mean modeling on Excel, then don't put that, because everybody and their mother can actually get on a document and type or do a PowerPoint basic presentation. So unless you have to say advanced Microsoft Office, and really should be focusing on those programs that are really mission critical in Microsoft, which would be like Excel and then modeling within Excel. Photoshop, InDesign, all that kind of stuff. Put that underneath computer so I can immediately see, oh, it's computer stuff, number 1. Number 2, languages is another key skill to have. And then under skills, you can also put your certifications, because that also bodes well with the skills you have, because now you've justified it with a certification or a license, right? And then I said interests, and interest is interesting, pardon the pun, because it allows the interviewer to have a mechanism of getting to know you on a personal level and talking points that you can use, right? So it's really important. You just don't put like traveling and reading, I swear to God, or cooking. You gotta zero in, give me something to talk about, right? Everybody and their mother probably likes to travel. So say off the beaten path kind of travel, budget travel, European cooking with, whatever. Just make it specific, because think about it, they're using this to be able to talk to you as a person.
Can I make one point here? This individual put agile as a skill. So when I asked them if they could, expand on what they meant, they were really honest and upfront about the fact that they just keyword stuffed and threw that in there, and they didn't know what they were talking about. And it's because the job that they were interested in applying for had that as a job requirement. Agile refers to a particular type of software development, and this person is not applying for a technical developer type of role. And so there was a huge, that's be honest, guys. Be honest about what you can do and what you can't do. You can overcome skill gaps, and that's actually part of preparing for an interview and figuring out how to, tell your story and show that you are willing to overcome some of those gaps. But please don't just take random keywords out of a job description in hopes that someone will notice you, because if they do notice you and you go through the resume screen and subsequent interviews, you're going to have to explain that, and they're going to question your integrity, to be honest. So
I agree. And these are all things that are going to be front and center, especially when you're interviewing and they found that you're super mousy and you can't really carry a conversation, even though you write, I am a social butterfly. Then they're going to see it because you are getting interviewed. You're seeing them face to face. So let's quickly jump. I just want to jump. We got a couple other points, but I think just in the interest of time, I want to kind of get through this quick. right here, we've got just one of the many bullet points. And this person's resume is not terrible because I'm still seeing numbers, right? And I love numbers because numbers basically indicate to me certain things like results driven and seeing results, accomplishments and so forth. But let's tear this one apart, okay? Someone help me out here. So this thing says current. I would use present, probably not current. And number two, it gives me the year. That's super annoying because I don't know if this happened in December of 2016 and, December 9th of 2016, and I have no idea. Put the month, for the love of God, put the month in the front. Then we know exactly when, and it gives a better time. And we know we're not trying to, we don't think this is happening in January and you have a whole year of experience because we're going to find out. So that's number one. Number two, let's just jump over to this one. Let's edit it together, okay? Mentor at least 7 students in their process of applying for graduate schools and fellowships. Already, grammatically, this thing's a hot mess express. So let's jump in here and give it a little bit of, life. So what I would do, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Let's do this. You'd say, we mentored, even though it's current and pretty much all of this should be in present tense. This one happened because they're talking about them already applying to graduate school and fellowships. Let's make it easy for the person to read. So we mentored. We don't want to put 7 because 7's a small number. So let's call it several, right? It keeps it within the scope of anywhere from 2 to, what would you say, 10, 15?
I think it's ambiguous and it's fine. I think that 7, depending on who you are, may not be a very impressive number. So if as you're reflecting on your own experience, if you feel like the results aren't going to be that impressive, find creative ways while remaining honest to just reframe what you've done, such that, somebody can, you're catching the eyes of a hiring manager.
Got it. And right now they say students. I'm not trying to force any disingenuous false advertising, but imagine these students were actually, underserved or underprivileged or ones that didn't have access at the school that this individual is working for. So you want to make mention of that. If they're underprivileged, if they don't have access to certain things, you want to make note of that in there, right? But I'm just going to highlight that, but I'm not going to keep it. But again, you want to be specific. Okay. So we helped a couple of students, right? During, right, the graduate school applications process and the fellowships, right? Resulting during the graduate school, and fellowship application process. Resulting, right, in admissions to selected schools, maybe even mention some, whatever it is, name of school, right, that you would put in there, right, or schools with over $100,000 in funding, right? Boom, what do we got there? We're telling you, we're making this sound grammatically correct because that's something that's going to irk anybody who's going to read this and be like, wait a second, this person's not even paying attention to actually proofread this. So you talk about that. You talk about the student. Again, we want to use specificity here if we can, type, right, if possible, if that is something that you can actually provide, right? And then you talk about it, not only that, but you talk about some of the schools. So you name the schools, and then you talk about the funding that you're able to secure for that individual or series of individuals, right? And that one is a really much better, more pronounced, straight to the point. A couple of other things to note here is that you don't want to have something like this and repeat it in 4 different ways and the different things. Each one of these bullets should highlight and focus on an area and a skill you have. So in this case, this person put marketing materials here, great, and manuals, I like it. They talk about their effectiveness here, their teaching courses here, they're talking about negotiating here. So this individual also did a good job because they highlighted different skill sets that they have, hard skills and soft skills, which are very, very important in the process.
Mana, let me make one point. As you are figuring out which bullet points to layer in,
yep,
order them in order of magnitude. So if your most significant accomplishment was the fact that you helped these students secure admissions and obtain funding, then make sure that's the first bullet point, and avoid laundry listing everything that you've done. It's okay if the hiring manager isn't aware of everything that you accomplished or that you did in that role. Your resume is not a laundry list of what you've done. It is, a snapshot of some of the key significant accomplishments that you have had, that do summarize to some degree some of the core activities or things that you accomplished or executed in that role. But frankly, you have to quantify and be very specific about the types of metrics and the kind of message that you convey here. And if you don't know which metrics to convey, then look at the role that you're applying for and find out what the key performance indicators tend to be for that role, and then do your best to mirror some of that language or to present statistics that are that really speak to some of the performance requirements or indicators for that particular role. That would be the last point that I would make there. And then the links there, again, remember, those are that's hyperlink text. It may not be read by an application tracking system, so you may need to remove those, and you can, to Hamada's earlier point, put them on your LinkedIn profile, highlight them there. Or if you have a personal website or portfolio, you can highlight that or say something to the effect of, portfolio available upon request, or you can put the link to your personal website in that header. I failed to mention that point earlier.
Awesome. Okay. Let's quickly hit the last point here. There's obviously a ton of material, ton of stuff that we're highlighting for you, but I want to be mindful of the time. This last point right here, Summer.
Yeah. So here, if you are a recent college grad, I'd say that if you graduated in the last 5 years, you should put your GPA on your resume if it was above a 3.0. And if you are applying to entry-level roles where you might not have a track record of experience, or maybe you've never had a job, or you've only carried a couple internships, then the focus needs to be on any relevant coursework that you may have taken where you acquired skills that could be relevant to that job. So if you learned how to do financial modeling, or perform high advanced statistical functions, or use certain applications that are relevant to the job, highlight those. And any additional certifications that you may have acquired or are currently seeking, you can add those there as well. The final point I'll make here, if you crush the SAT or another universal standardized test, then again, that just becomes a data point that you can put on your application. And even if it's not relevant to the role, most people know what the LSAT is. And, what you could do is you could put 178 out of 180 for, the individual living on the edge of the world that doesn't know that the LSAT's out of 180, or maybe, it's a US centric test from my understanding. I don't know that other countries use the LSAT. So if you are applying to international roles and you're a US applicant, then yes, somebody might not know what the LSAT is, but they can do the division there. And, I think surmise that that's a really excellent goal, putting you in the high 90th percentile. So okay. I think in summary, again, this is a generic resume, and it can be the foundation for what you build on as you apply to specific roles. We're not going to have the time to go into any additional detail, but hopefully we've given you a starting point to go back and look at your resume and reflect and redline and maybe seek some additional feedback from people in your network. Or if you'd like to reach out to us, we're happy to help.
Okay, and on that point, I want to kind of quickly finish this off. I'm loving this too much. As you guys can see, I get really pumped up when I get into the nitty gritty of this stuff, and I've been doing it for so long, as has Sama, and we've reviewed so many resumes, and we see the same issues. So hopefully that gave you guys a good sense of it. So again, just to kind of recap, Right Track admission started in 2008 during the last economic crisis, and it was on the back of the fact that I had just graduated from law school, passed the bar in California, was working at a law firm. A friend of mine approached me about starting Right Track. We worked together on it, and it's been a blessing in disguise because we've helped so many people along the journey. But for me, it actually allowed me to hedge because I was laid off from my law firm job in San Francisco, along with a ton of other attorneys at the time. And so it allowed me to kind of go seamlessly into Right Track. So that's what I did at that time. And we really have a personalized approach, as you can see. I don't, mess around. I get really into it. If you have thick skin, then you're going to survive what we're going to, take you through. But at the end of it, you will secure the job or get into the school you want to get into. We'll definitely do our best to increase your chances, and we're fairly confident that we can, because that's what we've been able to do through all the track record that we've achieved. So what we're going to get today in terms of our COVID Job Success Initiative is that we're providing you with these free webinars. We have some materials. We can send you over this presentation in and of itself. We offer free intro consultations to people who are interested. And finally, we have discounted prices for our services, for the one-on-one services. So please email us at info@RightTrackAdmissions. The first 5 emails that we receive today will get the free job profile review for about 30 minutes on an agenda, right? I know someone that you insisted on this, and I think it's picture perfect, an agenda that you want to have and goals that you want to achieve during that job profile review process. And just a heads up for next week, we are having a webinar on how to get into your dream grad school and secure critical funding, which for a lot of people is a huge consideration about, hey, can I get into grad school and can I get funding because I'm suffering due to what's going on? And this is a question that we're going to constantly, and we're writing an article about this and publishing it soon for people wondering if they should be applying. I'm going to be with my colleague and the director of college admissions at Right Track Admissions, Nadine Jawad, who is a Rhodes Scholar, finishing up her master's at Oxford and about to start her medical degree, hopefully soon, in California, and was a recipient of the Knight Hennessy Award. So she's gotten a ton of funding, whether during her time at the University of Michigan as an undergrad, at Oxford now, and once she pursues her medical degree. It will be at the same time, same place, same venues. We're trying to keep it consistent. So take a look at that. We also have a grad school assessment right there. It's called Grad School Assessment Form. So fill that out. Tell us a little bit about what you're planning to do, what subjects you're planning or you're interested in studying in. And that's obviously our bread and butter. We've helped everybody from law, MBA, medical, every graduate program conceivable through that process. And our areas that we focus on now was law, MBA, and college, but we also have a lot of experience in other areas, and we have experts who can do that work. And again, feel free to email us, info@RightTrackAdmissions, with any questions that you have. Call us, 888-RIGHT-TRACK. And we look forward to seeing you guys on the next webinar. But before I sign off, I'm going to shift us over so you can see us more clearly right there. We've got some questions. I'm going to fire one at Summer, and then I'll answer one myself. We don't have too much time. So here is a question from an individual that asked, if we have a cover letter, why have a professional summary?
I think that's a great point. I think most people don't, depending on I shouldn't say most people, but depending on what profession, you're in, you may not be submitting a cover letter. I can't remember the last time I submitted a cover letter. So I think it's a better use of time for me to have a very succinct, objective focused summary that really summarizes my experience, my accomplishments, and my goals, as opposed to investing in a cover letter. What I would do instead is take the language that I might put to a cover letter and either send somebody a private DM on LinkedIn or an email. So turn that cover letter into a thoughtful email. Okay.
And another quick question for you is does the ATS also review cover letters?
Some do. Yeah, absolutely. Think about it. An ATS, so you go onto a job application site, or you get to the page on a particular company's career section, and now you're applying online, and the form that you're filling out is likely going to be fed into an application tracking system. So yes, if you need to attach a cover letter or any other artifacts or assets, I think the same rules apply, that, any fancy text or imagery just may not get read by the system, depending on how that system is designed. So keep that in mind. Better safe than sorry, in my opinion. And again, if you are handing over an application, which is unlikely at this point, unless you're violating the self-quarantining rules that most states have put into practice right now or into motion, then maybe in that case you can include or use one of the fancier templates that I see sometimes.
Fantastic. Again, with that, those are some of the questions we've got. We've got a couple of more, but I want to be mindful of the time. Again, email us, putting all the information up there. Email us your information if you have questions for us. Again, we look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place, same platforms for how to get into your dream grad school and secure critical funding with my colleague Nadine. And make sure to fill out that form so that we can be able to cater the dialogue to you and resolve and solve and provide you with the feedback that you need for any questions that you have. So without further ado, I will say goodbye with my friend over here, the mascot. If you didn't know what it is, this is a lemur, a ringtail lemur, King Julian, think King Julian from Madagascar. It is now officially, as of today, the mascot of Right Track Admissions, and will be joining me on future webinars. And without further ado, I say goodbye from California.
Bye, everyone. Act on your anxiety. Really, I think it's about hanging in there and making sure that we're, keeping a positive mindset. I think that we're going to build resilience through this, and hopefully all of us can extend a hand and help one another this time. So good luck. Thank you. And one last point. We are doing another webinar on resume editing. We'll post that on our LinkedIn, Right Track's LinkedIn profile, as well as the Right Track on Facebook, with a link to that. So we can also provide that information there as well for you. We're going to be doing that next week with another group as well on the resume writing. We'll do another deep dive into that. So hopefully you guys can tune into that. Look out for those posts as well. And we look forward to hearing from you. Take care.